again. Today I'm going to talk about do-it-yourself stained glass 3D seahorse. Now, this is a 3D sculpture made out of glass and solder. So it is stained glass, but it is kind of like a sculpture. So I started off with this seahorse frame that I got at Goodwill, and it had lots of wires wrapped around it and stuff, but we took those all off. And then I covered the frame with copper foil. That way my solder will stick to it. Right now I'm trying to decide how to make the crest, the back decoration for my seahorse. And it ended up that was just way too convoluted and squiggly and stuff, and that just wasn't working correctly. So I simplified it some. But here I'm cutting it out on my Taurus ring saw. Now, you don't obviously have to use a ring saw, but for something this complicated, it's very difficult to do it by hand. You probably could, but it has a lot of in and out cuts, and it makes it very difficult. So I am using a ring saw. Now you can see there's a lot of white slushy water on top of my glass. That's because my water's not all that clean right now, which is making the extra white pigment in the water. And I think I have my water a little bit too deep in the reservoir of my saw, so it's kind of flooding the top of my work with water. It's kind of you have to have a happy medium, because you don't want to use too much water so it goes on top of your product once you're sawing. But if you don't have enough water, obviously you can't cut, because you need the water to lubricate and make it so you can cut the glass without having issues. Most of this video I am showing you at 4 times or 8 times the normal speed of life. So it's not this fast when you're actually doing it. It's just that if I did it at normal speed, it would take forever to do this video. And I'm not showing you everything anyway, but I just don't want to make it too long and kind of boring. So I'm cutting out, I used a Sharpie marker to draw out my pattern that I made. And I'm using a Sharpie marker to draw it out, and now I'm cutting on the line. Now, obviously, this line that I'm doing right now is what goes against the seahorse armature, so that has to be more exact. I could be a little bit freehand when I cut out the other side, because that was just, just free little spikes and stuff. Okay, so now I put it against my wire frame, and it's still not perfect. So I am using a marker, and I am drawing a line next to the wire sculpture to see where I need to adjust my glass so it fits really snug. And I will go back and forth on this. I will cut some more little pieces, and then I will try it again to see how it's fitting, and go back and forth until it fits nicely, because I want it to be pretty snug. I mean, it doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but the closer the better. Right now I'm using the full width of 7/32 black backed copper foil, and I am trying to foil this cutout. Now, of course, it's kind of tricky to foil something that has a lot of ins and outs like this, but you just do the best you can. You want to use some kind of probe of some type to try to stick it in the right places and get it as close and even on both sides as you can. And then you want to press down on both sides so it's nice and burnished. So it is a little time consuming, especially when you do a shape like this, but it's fun and it ends up being worth it. So yeah, so obviously, since I did speed up the picture, this is taking a little bit longer than what I'm showing you. but you get the idea of what I'm doing, and that's the important thing on one of these videos is I want you to see how I make it work. And then I'm using the probe again to smooth out the sides and the edges. You really need to do that so that the solder doesn't end up kind of separating the foil from the glass. You want to have it stuck down as good as you possibly can. I use the black back stuff on a project like this. I usually use black backs because then if I'm going to use like copper foil or black foil, I mean copper patina or black patina, I won't have that really shiny inside look that I would have if I use the copper back. I mean, if I know I'm going to use copper patina, then it's fine. Yeah, use your copper backed foil. It's usually less expensive also. But if there's a possibility you're going to change your mind and decide to use black or decide to keep it silver, you're not going to want to have that copper color probably on the inside. Now to foil these pieces of glass, I didn't want the full width of your 7/32 inch foil, so I actually cut about a quarter off of it. So I have like 3/4 of the width. Because what I want is I want my foil to wrap around my glass, but I don't want it to wrap around much. So I want it to wrap around just a little bit so that when it's soldered on, it stays on nicely. Because a lot of my projects, I just put the foil on the edge, which makes them a lot weaker. Yes, you get to see the shape better, but that they're not really hung on as well. So this way the solder will end up wrapping around the glass also, and it will be more sturdy than just going on the edge. So you can see I just kind of went right down the middle of the foil, and it's nicely foiled right along the edge. And these are little mosaic glass pieces that I bought on Amazon, so you can use any glass pieces that you can get. Another typical glass shape are the triangles, squares, rectangles, and rhombus shapes that you can buy that people often use for mosaic work. And I'm foiling the triangles right now. And I'm using the full width of my 7/32 inch black backed copper foil because my flat glass, like the fin that I did, was done in the full width. So I figured it's okay to use the full width for this. And yes, it does kind of encroach on your shape, which is the problem with overlapping the glass that much. But for this project, I think it works nicely. Now I did put some flux. I'm using a gel flux so it doesn't like drool right off the glass really quickly. And I put some flux all the way around it, and now I am starting the soldering process. Now for the most part, I'm not putting flux on every single little piece because it's very time consuming to do it that way. And I don't really need that much flux to make it just attach. So if it's going to attach okay with just a little bit of flux around the edge, then I'm going for it. Sometimes I have been adding flux to all of it. It's really whatever's needed. I am wearing some silicone gloves that are really handy to use because if you wear gloves, your hands don't burn if you get a little bit of solder on them. Excuse me. So that's what those bright pink fingers are. Those are pink gloves. So basically for the next few minutes of this video, I am just going to be adding more and more mosaic pieces. Of course, you can put them in little patterns like I'm doing right here. I'm starting my little hexagon shapes and putting, or octagon shapes, and putting them right along the edge. And then I made another row right next to it. And then I had to take my wheeled glass nippers and cut some of the little glass pieces so that they would fit, because they weren't exactly fitting. Now, when I cut these, I did not end up going back and foiling the other side, the side that I cut off. Of course, you could do that. You'd probably want to cut a whole bunch and then foil them and then go back and then start soldering again. So you can see there's a little gap right there where the glass didn't have foil on it, because obviously the solder's not going to stick to that. Now you can add some extra solder in those little gaps to try to fill those spaces. So you can see right there, I cut a little piece off of one of the units. Now I'm starting at the top with another area. Those tweezers I like to use are tweezers that have either the silicone tips or the ceramic tips, so that the solder doesn't stick to them, because it's really not fun to have a pair of tweezers that the solder ends up soldering onto, or that gets so hot that you start burning your fingers. I also use both the different types of tweezers. Some tweezers are cross tweezers, where when you pinch the end, you're releasing the hold on the glass, or sometimes when you pinch the end on the other style, you are opening the end of the tweezer. So I like having both kinds, because they come in handy having both kinds of grips. And if you look up tweezers, it makes more sense, because they'll show you how they work. Now I'm going to go back after I do these pieces, and I'm going to add some detail to the solder, and I'm going to smooth out the solder. So right now I'm not all that worried about the soldering. I just want to hold them all together. I'm using a paper towel, as you can see, to help support the underside of the glass tiles. And right now I'm taking a paper towel and I'm just kind of straightening it out to kind of add support. It's a little tedious doing a three-dimensional object like this, because you're not just working off a flat surface. You have all different angles to deal with. I kind of design as I go. I'm decided that this particular seahorse is going to be done in golds and ambers, going into oranges and reds, but that's the whole color scheme. And I'm going to use different shapes, these honeycombed octagonal and hexagonal shapes, along with the triangles, is basically the shapes of the glass that I'm using, besides the stuff that I cut by hand, I mean with my ring saw. So you don't need a whole lot of solder to hold the pieces together. This is not one of those projects that I am actually filling all the gaps between all the different pieces of glass with solder or with glass. I don't mind having spaces of non glass and non-soldered areas for this project. So it really is up to you what you want to do, whether you want to have it all filled in or not. Now I'm going to have lights in this thing when I'm done, and I'm fine with just having the clear lights just shine in between them. Now, as it is, I have hundreds and hundreds of pieces in this thing when I'm done with it. So adding the extra weight and time of, those are my orange triangles, rhombus shapes. So obviously adding more solder and more shapes of glass in between each one would just be even more arduous, complicated. I didn't really think that was needed. So I'm having the open look of having air in between them. Now I'm purposely not having these shapes go together without gaps in between. I want to have some gaps in between because I know later on I will have gaps. So I don't want to start some areas with the glass solidly filling the space, because then I thought that would look kind of silly if some was really solidly fitting and then some had gaps in between. So I wanted them all to have gaps. But again, I have a pattern going with it. Now I do buy a lot of glass at a time and foil hundreds of pieces at a time so that I don't have to go back and start foiling and start ordering glass again. But even saying that, I did run out of oranges and ambers to do this project because it just took so many pieces. So usually when I'm just chilling and watching TV at night or something, I will be foiling pieces of glass because I like to have a nice assortment. I don't want the colors and amount of shapes of glass to dictate my designs. I want to be able to decide what to do with my designs irregardless of the glass that I have, if that makes sense. So if I'm working on something and I decide, oh, I think I'd like to do pinks here instead of oranges like I was going to, I can then switch over to another color because I did not have preconceived pieces of glass already prepared for the project. I know I had a whole bunch of those yellows and those yellow six-sided pieces. So I knew that I would have enough to do the project I wanted, at least I hoped I would, and I ended up having enough, and I have some left over, but I will probably have to buy more because now I'm not going to have enough if I decide to do another large project like this, and I want to do it in yellow because it took so many pieces. Now, the last time I timed foiling little pieces of glass like this, they came out to about 1.5 minutes to foil and then burnish one piece of glass. Maybe I should try timing it again, but that's what I base it on. So yeah, it is a time-consuming project to do these sculptures. Yeah, some areas will be filled in more than others just because of the nature of the art. But I am, as you can see, leaving spaces also. One of the things that it does get tricky is trying to hold your project at the right angle for your work. So that can be kind of fun to try to get it to rest properly. Now that piece I decided I needed to cut off the top of that corner. Get rid of that piece, and then it'll fit a little bit better. So I do adjust these pieces when needed. And yeah, as I said, sometimes it's just kind of tricky to hold it exactly the way you want to. But see, you don't even notice that I didn't foil that tip of that rhombus shape. So cutting a little bit off still works. Now see, those tweezers are the kind that you don't have to keep pinching them harder to hold them. If you pinch them hard, it releases the project you're holding. So it's the opposite of a typical type of tweezer. But it's very handy for something like this because you can pinch your product on the tweezer, and then it's there. It's just kind of an extension of your fingers. It's very handy. Yeah, sometimes they don't hold exactly where you want them, and so you can just heat the solder up again and then move the piece of tile back to a better space. And unlike flat stained glass like window panes and stuff, the finished look is very different. The solder is, in a project like this, is more textured and less smooth. If you try to smooth out all the solder perfectly like you would on a paneled type of stained glass work, you would probably heat up the foil too much, and you might have a problem with the foil like popping off the glass. Right now I'm doing what's called tinning. I'm tinning the foil, basically putting a thin layer of solder on the foil ahead of time. And this is because this area is a little bit trickier to do, is the face of this seahorse. I am trying to solder on one of those flat glass marbles, and I'm trying to make it so that it adheres nicely without slipping. I don't want the foil to slip off the glass round marble. I'm now adding some more pieces to the face. And then of course I had to cut some more glass to fit in the little spaces in between so that I could finish up the head of the seahorse. And I also used some triangles, and I cut some of the rhombus shapes into triangles. Now I have some larger 6-sided glass shapes that I bought pre-cut, which was really handy. I think they came in an assortment, this particular group. So I had to buy a few different assortments to actually get enough to do a project, because there were so many different colors in the assortment. But that's okay, I'll use them eventually. And I foiled them again with the full width of the 7/32 inch black backed copper foil. And what I'm using here is a variety of oranges to reds. I did not have enough of like all the same color red or all the same color orange. So I had to decide, what I wanted to do. And I could have just ordered a whole bunch more and then had some more to choose from. But I decided that I'm going to just have a little bit of a variety of the orangey reds for this particular area. I didn't want to go back to doing golds or yellows in this area because this is going to go against that flat glass fin thing that I made way at the beginning for the back of the Seahorse, and I wanted to have the contrast of having a reddish color against where the yellow flat glass was, or the gold flat glass was. And these pieces just fit quite nicely. They pretty much filled the space that I needed them to fill, which was nice. So this is what it's looking like at this point. Kind of silly, but fun. Okay, over here I made a little door. I used 14 gauge bare copper wire and formed it into a shape that fit a big area of my Seahorse. And this is where I will put the lights in, and I'll be able to feed the lights into the different areas of the Seahorse, and I will also be able to have the cord come out of that area. So I wanted to have a little door that's kind of hides, and I wrapped some 20 gauge copper, as you saw, at one area that I went wrapped a lot around, and then looped it around the basic frame of the Seahorse to work as hinges. I don't actually have a latch at the bottom of it because I'm using gravity to kind of hold it shut once it's in the air. So right now I added some flux right there, and I'm trying to put some solder on this so that it will take the patina that I want to use. I'm thinking I'm going to use a copper patina. So if there's areas that are not covered with solder, the copper will be similar to the copper patina, the copper of the wire and the copper of the foil. They'll all kind of blend together, and I think that will look just fine. And plus, I think the copper will go nicely with the golds and orange and red color scheme that I'm using. I think the black might be too much of kind of an outline. I want to have it a little bit softer, so I think the copper will look very nice. So sometimes you have areas like what I did right there, which is kind of a gap. And what I did was I filled that little gap with solder so I could connect the two areas. Here again, I'm using my wheeled nippers to cut off a section. And when I'm all done, I can just add extra solder to that area if it shows too much and kind of fill that gap in. Or as I said, I could have cleaned the glass off and then foiled that. The reason I'm saying cleaned it off is my gloves have flux on them, and there's no way I could make foil stick to that piece of glass that I just cut because it's contaminated with flux, and the foil would just kind of slip off of it. So I would have to clean the glass thoroughly. See, I'm adding some extra solder right there, and that kind of makes it look like it was foiled because it's filled in. So that's really your choices. So yeah, you could cut a whole bunch off at the beginning, trim a bunch so you have a bunch trimmed to work with. I'm adding some triangles here and there to help with some of the gaps that are kind of a little bit big. But here again, I'm going to have definite cracks between them. I'm not trying to fill everything up. as you can see. You can also see with this particular project, I'm not fluxing a lot of the work. Um, for the base of the tail, I started off with the larger pieces of six-sided glass, mosaic glass pieces that I bought. And then after I got down a little bit, I started with some of the smaller ones. Now you might wonder what those wire things right by my left finger right there, those little wires that I have in the corner right there are to hold the little door kind of open so it doesn't, the door doesn't like collapse into the whole Seahorse frame. So it only shuts so far. You can see this particular piece of glass I did foil with a little bit thinner stripe of foil. So sometimes my foiling's not, you know, that day I probably thought I needed to have thinner foil. I try to keep them consistent from one project. So I tried for this particular project to have all the foiled little pieces like that to have the same width of foil outline, but sometimes you don't get that. You find that all the scraps you have that were that color were foiled in a different size. You can see that I'm using a scrap piece of plastic wheel that your solder comes on. So I keep things like that on my table to help rest my projects on when I'm soldering. So as you can see, sometimes it's kind of difficult to hold the part perfectly before you solder it. That piece needed to get cut, so you can see I cut it a little bit, trimmed it a little bit on one side. Because even when you buy these metal frames, they're not necessarily perfectly symmetrical. Now, I do like to buy frames and lampshades and stuff that are already built because, and then repurpose them because the wires that they use is usually pretty darn strong. Now, what I'm doing right now is I am putting little beads of solder at every junction of the mosaic shapes for a little added detail. Now, I waited till the original solder was cold in that area so that these globs of solder are just kind of barely adhering themselves to the solder, so they're not like melting in completely. So the result is kind of a round blob of solder. So this is a decorative thing that you can do decorative things with solder. And of course I had to do the whole thing, so here I am speeding it up even more so I can add more of them all over the place. And there was quite a lot to do. Now I'm holding my fin that I made and holding it in place. I'm going to tack it in place wherever there meets another piece of wire, and then I ended up filling the gap in between the flat glass and the three-dimensional part. I did end up putting flux around the edge for this. I want to have all of this foil tinned. I do not want to, I'm not using like extra wire, outlining the glass with extra wire like I sometimes do for extra strength, because these fins is just one piece of glass. It's not made of a whole bunch of different small pieces. I'm not overly concerned about them bending or falling apart. I mean, yeah, if I drop my poor little Seahorse, it would break, but this will be fine. As you can see, it's kind of making like an outline where it meets the body of the Seahorse. I want to have some like differentiation into the fins, so I'm adding some wire to kind of decorate the fins so it's not just one solid glob. So I'm using 18 gauge bare copper wire, and I kept the curve that comes with when you buy a coil of wire. It comes like usually in a spool, which is really nice because it's a nice, beautiful curve. And I'm adjusting the curve, but the curve is really helping get a nice, smooth arc. Just using regular wire cutters to cut the wire. The trick is I need to have a nice, beautiful curve, and I need it to lay quite flat so I can solder it on. And then I ended up tinning these wires that I put on so that there's no question in the color of the finished item when it's patinaed. I didn't worry about if they were totally tinned. You know, as long as the top of it was tinned, it was fine. So here I'm holding it in place because while I'm tinning it, it's obviously going to heat it up. So then I don't want it to like come off. So I held it in place with the pliers, and then I just did the light. I just ran my iron lightly on it. See, it doesn't take much to have it come off. And what I decided to do, what I would do every other pointy part of the fin on one side, and then I turned the Seahorse over and did the other ones on the other side so that they had some decoration on both sides. Now, obviously, one could have had each section of the fins a separate piece of glass. So that's always an option if you want to get that fancy. You could have multiple pieces of glass, but I didn't want to do that with this. For one thing, I thought it would just get a little bit too thick and clumpy. I like the lightness of just having these thin lines for the fins, as opposed to a foiled and soldered line, which would be probably 2 or 3 times as wide once you get done. And this was much more delicate. And of course, when I was adding these fin designs, I wanted to make sure that the line of the curve was going to allow for the curve on the other side. Because I didn't want the lines to overlap from one side to another. I wanted them all to take up their own space. I also added some solder on top of the foiled outline, so that if there was any irregularities where the corners were, where the foil cracked in the corners, I could just add a glob of solder right there. And I added little dots of solder on the edge and on the tops of both sides of the fins. So as you can see, they're also textured. Now I'm adding his little baby fins that I put on the sides of him that stick out on each side. They each have a glass fin thing, and the fins themselves have pieces of wire for decorations. And these pieces of wire that I put on for the fins also acted as a way to make them more secure onto the Seahorse, because I actually shoved one end of each wire and kind of wrapped it around a hole in a gap in the Seahorse's body, so that helped. See, I'm doing it right now. So that helped secure it, because I kind of like tucked it inside and then added solder to it. Because I was a little concerned that these little fin things would fall off. This was kind of tricky, trying to come up with a way that the lines of this fin could actually go with the fin shape itself. Now, because I soldered the left-hand corner first, I could do some bending of the solder of the wire with it only attached to one spot, but I had to be really gentle with it because it wasn't really attached that well. It was just at that very tip. So you can see, if I did a video of every single piece I attached, the video would go on for hours. There we go. So this is what it looked like before I added the patina. I just wanted to show you how I didn't really want to leave it silver, because the silver really, your eye goes to the silver lines more than the glass, and that's really not what I wanted. And this is with the copper patina added. So it gives it a coppery look, and of course I have the lights on the inside. And I really like the little extra globs of solder for texture. And now he's hanging up in my living room on a little chain. That the chain loops around his top fin there. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this and have fun creating different shapes and sculptures. Bye-bye.